What's up, viewers? Lately, I've been getting a lot of concerns with my art friends, and people come up to me and ask for art advice about how do I approach rendering. That's basically anything after line work, whether you're doing base colors, general grayscale stuff, or if you're trying to make it look as realistic as possible. I've been getting questions and been seeing my friends do stuff like that, and I just decided, instead of just writing it out, I was going to make another tutorial video because I hadn't done one in a while. And basically what I did is I took this reference, Danielle. She's this cosplayer I follow that I drew her once, and I think I can put a picture of my old sketch up right now. And I drew her a while back, and I just, it was nice for my level, but I really wanted to do something with her again, so I went ahead and took this photo of her and sketched it out. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you 4 different types of methods that I use as far as coloring and shading and rendering. They kind of branch off in 2, so I'll get 2 base starts and then I'll copy and paste the 2 underneath for a more detailed version and how to approach those things separately. So without further ado, before I go into that, I'm going to be 100% honest with this thing. I might not edit it as far as my stuff, but who cares? I'm just trying to get the information out to you. So if I mess up or I say something silly or whatever, roll with me and let's get this information out there. Without further ado now, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about right now is the grayscale technique. This is a powerful tool that allows people to have the freedom of not having to focus on colors and contrast and all the other stuff that goes into this stuff while you're working on things like shading and referencing light. It's a simple way to get around, adding dynamics to the sketch you have without doing way too much at once. And it's a very, nice and well-rounded technique that some people like to use. A lot of people like to use, actually, I'm sorry. I personally don't. I use a different technique, which I'll show in the next slide over. I said slide. Anyway, in the next example, I'll do that for you. But the main thing that, you can benefit the most about it is the fact that you don't have to worry about those color values, so you can focus strictly on making sure your light values are fine and that the shading that you want is dynamic to the way you want it. And then we can overlay that and put on things like soft light effects, burn if you want to do that effect with it too. It helps out. It's a lot of stuff that goes into that, which I'll show you in the third example when we actually start getting down to adding the coloring to the grayscale. Quickly, I want to talk about the brushes that I use. That way you guys can have an example of what I'm using as far as things like soft blending or hard blending or just general stamping out large segments of color, stuff like that. And I'm going to put those on screen so that you can all see what's going on. So thank you past future me or future past me, whichever person is recording, blah blah blah. Anyway, so one of the brushes that I use is the basic brush. It's basic 1. It's just a general well-rounded, it's actually a circular brush that actually is a harp type. It's a harp brush. And I use that for most of my general blocking of colors. I don't use it for anything else except maybe erasing as well, just because it's quick, efficient, and it works all in one. I also use this other brush. It's basic 2 opacity. And I'll have, again, the locations linked up there as I'm talking through these. I use this brush here for soft blending and soft blocking. It helps me make sure everything is nice and smooth and fine to a point. That way I can, kind of have an idea of where I want things while I'm, going about stuff. And I can just blend accordingly as I'm working with stuff. I use this after I've done all the basic blocking, so that way I can have a defined look of where I'm aiming for. Another brush I use, and I think I use 4. I use 4 brushes. I use the Blender Basic. This is my go-to blending tool. I just generally, when I'm blending, I got out of the habit of trying to do things on one layer, and this blending tool, it helps me kind of get past that. I use it a lot so it doesn't look so blocky and so unnatural. It helps blend colors into each other, so it's a smooth transition versus it being, just totally separate. Like you can see it as I'm blending through, it's kind of getting a form with itself, so it's a nice, pretty image after you take some time to blend. And the last important brush I use as far as things go is Ink 3 G Pen. It's a super refined hard brush, but the thing about this is its pressure is built on the size and the length of the tail, if that makes sense. I can control whether or not I want a thick line or a thin line with this tool, and I use it a lot for accents after I've done all the line work. This is like my primary line art tool now. It used to be a different brush, but I like the definition of this. It's crisp, and I can rely on it for line work easily. But as far as things like, you know, adding detail as far as shine or just a touch of character, I'll use this brush here on a low size, maybe a low small size, and I'll be very gentle with the pressure so that way I can make sure that I'm just using it for detail. So that's a very good brush for detail as well. Okay, let's talk about Grayscale general techniques. Hopefully I'm not overextending this past 5 minutes because I've kind of broken this down into 5-minute segments each. But general tips on grayscaling is just go with the flow. After you set up your white block of, or hopefully not white, but slightly darker than white, after you set that up, you just take it a step at a time. You start off with the slightest change of gray, and then you keep working down until it gets darker. At least for me personally, it works for me when I work from light to dark instead of dark to light, because my dark values kind of get a little too strong when I work backwards. So this helps me keep in order with how much I want contrast to affect the entire diameter of the piece. With referencing the picture of Danielle, I kind of just focus on the dark shades of where her abdomen might be, or her shoulder might be, her torso, her neck, facial structure, character stuff like that. That's the most important thing I can really lock down with and see, okay, well, I need to make this darker, I need to make this lighter, stuff like that. And a little bit goes a long way. If you stack on top of each other and you kind of shade accordingly, you can get a nice picture with it. So just keep that in mind when you're going with grayscale. And actually, that's an all-around thing when you're dealing with stuff. It just it's easier to translate with grayscale. Again, you'll see me here shading rapidly as I go through. I'm just trying to make sure I have those darker highlights and those darker shadows that I want to add contrast to the piece to give her a more natural look as far as how I'm dealing with the dimensions here. I didn't go too crazy with her hair because at the end of the day it's just all black, and not that you won't see the lighting on black hair, but you can't make too much of an impact with it without running into things like, okay, well, now it's black, super black, and it just doesn't make sense. And by super black, I mean like you'll be at the far bottom left, like absolute bottom left of my color square up there. So I try to avoid that normally when it comes to setting up lighting, because that's a very unrealistic dark. So we try to avoid that with our color wheel, so we kind of keep it generally light and keep light on our feet. Okay, so we're moving on from grayscale, we're moving to base colors. Base colors, I basically set up all the colors that I use in the original reference and keep them there. I don't do anything to these things, I don't do anything to the colors or the hues. I just pick my colors based off of what I see on the side and I go for it, and that's it. That's just all the base color is to me at that point. What I'll do is I'll have my reference picture and I'll use my color wheel to figure out what I want with that thing. I don't normally, or with the sketch, I don't normally use the eyedropper and do that. It's easier, yes, but I like to feel more in control with what I'm doing versus stealing from the source. And it's nothing wrong with that, but personally it's not for me. Speaking of, I want to talk about quickly referencing, because I didn't get a chance to talk about that in the first segment. Referencing, I encourage that you always have at least 2 references, whether it's a pose reference or a visual reference. For me, I have 2. In this picture, I have a pose reference, which is Danielle, and I have the second picture next to me, which is the ideal rendering reference I want to have. I use this along with my style to kind of get an image of where I want this picture to look, or how I want this picture to look when I'm finished with it, by the time I'm done with it. So I encourage you to have at least 2 references, one that you're actually using for the art, and the second one you're using so you can have an idea of where you want this thing to be after you're finished. It helps me a lot, and it's something that I take with me constantly. The more references, the better, but at least have those 2 in mind when you're doing this, please. Okay, so going on to this color of the base colors, something you'll notice I'm doing is I'm just using my big fat basic tool to kind of go through things. I'm not totally, or no, what I do nowadays is I kind of shade in character so I can have my layers sit, and it's just easier overall as I work. But do not be afraid to shade over the lines. This isn't a coloring book. This isn't permanent ink. You can always undo, you can always erase. But please go through that line, because what happens is if you don't normally go through the line, or if you use the lasso tool, like I know Photoshop has it, Krita doesn't have a solid Photoshop tool. We have a select tool that allows you to click, and if your lines aren't perfect or they're not closed, it'll select everything that kind of loops outside of that thing, so you can bleed into holes and it messes the whole thing up. So I always paint outside the lines if I need to, and then I'll go back and erase any excess. It keeps the line clean, it keeps it in the black ink, and it looks very great by the time you're finished with it. And that's generally how I approach my base color. There's nothing fancy about it. I just block it out, I go for it, and we're done by the time we're finished with it. Okay, so I've kind of cleared up my base colors. Now we're moving on to the first of the different rendering techniques I use as far as like actually making it look realistic. It's going to be the soft light approach. I picked this up. I cannot remember for the love of God where I got this from, but I see a lot of Medibang users do this, where they'll paint something in grayscale and then they'll throw it out and then do some soft light on top of it, and it looks magnificent. It looks like a water, like they do a lot of watercolor stuff. And I can't translate that to save my life, but I've tried over the years, and here's what I've kind of got down to. And it looks really nice, but I have to employ other techniques with this in order to kind of get what I want from it. So what you'll see me here do here is I normally break this off in sections that based off of skin, the shirts, hairs, all that stuff. I normally break them down in different layers, but I forgot I went one layer with the grayscale. So what you'll see me do here is I'll switch over to light, soft light, have the layer above it, and set it to alpha lock, which I'll explain what alpha lock is in a second. And I'll go through and I'll kind of think about what colors I want. It's kind of weird to see all the color stuff that goes on with that stuff, so you'll see me kind of like look at the basic color composition a lot as far as actually going through and looking at just her skin tones or her pants and a bunch of other stuff. So that's that thing you'll see me do where the screen goes white and you'll see just like colors and a lot of mess with unformed colors and stuff. That's basically what you're seeing, is me looking at the light composition, or the color composition. Okay, I'm gonna briefly talk about that alpha lock thing I was talking about. When I make a layer on Krita, it's a normal layer. When I take that layer and I put a layer above that and then hit the the A with the dash in the center, above it, it sets that channel or that layer to the alpha lock of the one below it, directly below it. If it's in a group, it's always gonna alpha lock to the one directly at the bottom, no matter what. So I can keep stacking layers on top of the layers, and it'll always alpha lock to the one at the very bottom, which is convenient for stuff like shading multiple types of things on a skin layer. So I can always have a layer of, like, I guess multiply, or I'll do something where I have an overlay and it'll always default to the very bottom layer, provided I don't do something like group them weird or something like that. And that does work with groups. So if I would take a bunch of group layer things where I have like all of her body, and I decide, hey, I want to just paint over her body and keep the glasses out of it, I'll group up all of the body stuff, leave the glasses out of it, and then put a channel over that and alpha lock it. So it's a pretty convenient tool to alpha lock stuff as far as shading goes, so you can keep everything nice in order and not have to worry about coloring outside of the dimensions you set. Okay, so as you see me kind of wrapping things up using soft light here, I'm not being too thorough with soft light. I just normally kind of catch the outlines of everything. That's a new word. But yeah, I'm trying to catch the outlines of everything, so you'll see my close-ups aren't as clean as they should be. No problem, it's totally fine. I'm just trying to show you the technique in itself of what's going on. I'll start to wrap things up, and you'll see me switch to burn. Burn is a super nice tool that I found pairs well with soft light, because soft light, while it's great for kind of painting over, general shading and lighting stuff like with grayscale, it kind of suffers as far as making it look present to me. So what I'll do is I'll go behind myself, and after I do all of that, normally again on separate layers, I'll go through here, in this case here, and kind of paint over everything and burn, so that way I can get those colors to really pop to me, get them a little bit more saturated, not too saturated, but just enough to give her some skin tone and some life, and kind of make those colors actually look like the colors that I want. Quickly, before we wrap up the session with the soft light, I wanted to mention that I don't use the burn I don't use burn with full opacity. I normally bring it down to about 70, 60, depending on how I feel about the whole piece. Sometimes the burn is too strong, sometimes the burn is not good. So when I do this stuff, sometimes the burn is good. Anyway, when I do this stuff, I'm kind of like trying to pay attention to like how I want the picture to look against the reference. I think that I got pretty damn close after I finished working with this thing, so I was pretty satisfied with how the soft light interacts with the burn, and I called it a wrap right there, and I went on to the next technique. Okay, so we're moving on to my personal favorite technique to do. We're moving from the soft light technique, we're moving to what I call just, it's just my basic rendering technique. I use normal, I use multiply, and I use, I think, color dodge or screen, depending on how I feel about things. I've been using color dodge a lot more recently because it's a softer glow in colors and stuff. It's not just necessarily making values lighter, like screen does. It kind of also gives it a color of its own while elevating that light source. So I do use color dodge now to kind of give my characters or my sketches a little bit of a light ambience, which has been super great as far as stuff recently. So you'll see me do this, and I'll explain how I go about this business in a second. Okay, so something that I have to talk about that I see the most thing, the primary reason actually why I started this tutorial is when I see people shade their characters, they always go south, full south when it comes to the color wheel, and it's something that every beginner artist does, every intermediate artist tries to break away from, and it kind of gets sloppy, and you can't really get around to doing it without someone telling you, hey, try it this way. And I want to be that person to tell everyone to try it this way. Instead of going totally south down the saturation wheel, you might use a triangle, I use a square, whatever it is. What you're doing to yourself at that point is you're desaturating the picture. You're not just making things darker for shadow, you're desaturating the picture by going straight down. And that's how you get these really kind of grayish grays for shadows, and it doesn't look good, especially when you've worked so hard to bring color to the piece. It always makes it look really kind of clammy. So what I'll do as far as my shading is, I'll take my wheel, and since it's a square here, and actually it doesn't even matter if you go square or triangular or circular, you're still going in diagonal motion. If I want darker hues, darker shadows, I always go a little bit south, but I always go a little bit right too when I want darker colors. That keeps the saturation levels pretty close to each other, so you're not totally kind of just shooting yourself in the foot, but it also makes sure that you ensures that you have a darker color. But also, I'll take my color wheel and I'll either slide it left if I want colder colors, or right, based off of where it's at, because I wouldn't go for darker colors from yellow to green. I would go to red if I want dark colors. So it depends on where you are on the color wheel and what how well you know your color theory to kind of deal with that stuff right there. And then you can get some cool effects with that stuff, but generally I always go diagonal south. I'll go southwest. Okay, hold on. I'll go down and then right, and then turn my color wheel also to a darker temperature so I can ensure that I'm getting a nice shadow. Or if the other way around, if I'm going into a light color, I'll go up then left and then go to a lighter color. Works the same way if you're trying to get a lighter contrast. So you'll see me employing the same techniques as I did with Grayscale. As far as shading and blending and stuff, I'll go ahead and blend, drop a couple of pieces that I want as far as the colors, and then I'll kind of blend accordingly into the skin. This has been how I've been going through this method for quite some time recently, and I think I've got a nice little system I work with as far as things go. General shading habits that I like to take in consideration with is I always pay attention to facial contours. One of the things you could do for yourself as an artist, makeup tutorials. I know it sounds weird, but makeup tutorials give you so much insight on shading faces, and I think that's one of the most profound things you can do for yourself as an artist. Not only worrying about it, and not even just talking about portraits or whatever. Just in general, it helps out understanding things like lighting, shading, color theory, contrast in skin, tonalities, all that stuff. It helps so much, so I encourage you as an artist to at least kind of go through some makeup tutorials. You don't have to, but it does give you an edge on the game. At least in my experience, it does. Alright, and as far as wrapping comments, as far as everything goes with this picture here, I'm just doing some highlight stuff. I went through and modified our glasses a little bit to give it another shine to that. I'm doing a lot of accent stuff on a new layer on top of my line art because I have this blur on the line art that kind of gives it a little bit of energy, and I don't want that to be overshadowing the accents, because the accents are what make my pictures pop. So I'll go ahead and use my my brush for that, and it comes out pretty nicely here. I think I went and added a border around the picture and kind of played around with that, changed the background color and wrapped it all up. So generally speaking, it was a pleasure doing this. Hopefully this tutorial helped you and many others like you in your position or whatever. If you have any comments, please let me know. If you have any suggestions on how I can improve my technique, please let me know that as well. I'm more than happy to learn from other artists. I don't really have that much of a community as far as stuff like that. I keep, not to say I keep to myself, but it's hard for me to branch out and be like, hey, how do you do this stuff? Because a lot of artists kind of stay in their circles and stuff. So if you have any comments, please throw them in the the comments below. I'll be reading. If you want to say something nice, awesome. If you want to give me some criticism, I'm open. Both negative, positive. I'm a big boy. So just plug me in. Let's hopefully see if this could help someone out in your shoes, or anything else. If you know someone who's struggling or wants some advice like this, please send it to them. Let people know. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you like it, more content will be here, so subscribe. I do a lot of stuff on this channel, but it's been a pleasure drawing this sketch of, or these 4 sketches and renderings of Danielle. I'll have to post it on my Instagram. Without going on, I bid you farewell and good luck in your art journey.